All things bright and beautiful you are, all things wise and wonderful you are. In my darkest night, you brighten up the skies, a song will rise. I will sing a song of hope, sing along. God of heaven, come down, just to know that you are near is enough. God of heaven, come down, come down. Oh, sing a song of hope, sing along. God of heaven, come down, just to know you and be loved is enough. God of heaven, come down, come down. All things new, I can start again. Creator God, calling me your friend. Sing praise my soul to the maker of the skies. A song will rise, and I will sing a song of hope, sing along. God of heaven, come down, just to know that you are near is enough. God of heaven, come down, come down. Oh, sing a song of hope, sing along. God of heaven, come down, just to know you and be loved is enough. God of heaven, come down, come down. Sing a song of hope, sing along. God of heaven, come down, just to know that you are near is enough. God of heaven, come down, come down. Oh, sing a song of hope, sing along. God of heaven, come down, just to know you and be loved is enough. God of heaven, come down, come down.
When I was growing up, I used to think that science and faith were totally incompatible with each other. That you had to choose one or you had to choose the other, but you could not have both. On the one side, you had reason. On the other side, you had superstition. And this wasn't something that was explicitly taught to me, but it's kind of like in the air, in the culture. And I'm wondering if you've ever felt that tension in the air. Especially here in Silicon Valley. I mean, this is kind of the epicenter of science and technology. I mean, there are times when I feel it. I remember not that long ago being in a gathering with some other tech company CEOs. And it was about 20 of us or so in the room. And somehow the topic of religion came up. And someone made this kind of offhand comment that, well, I mean, of course, all of us here in the room as rational, smart people, we're all atheists. And kind of a lot of the people in the room kind of chuckled and nodded. And I wonder, why is there that presumption? And how do we as Christians respond to that? As far back as I remember, I have loved science. And I'm sure I'm not the only one at the river who is wired that way. And I think a lot of us who have this kind of inclination, especially amidst our very techie Silicon Valley culture, it can sometimes feel confusing of how we integrate those parts of ourselves. And for some of us, the tension between what might seem like conflicting worldviews can create doubts and become even a hindrance to us deepening our relationship with God. But even if this isn't how you are wired and you've never felt that inner tension, I still think today's message is relevant for you because I bet you have someone in your family or have a friend who is wired this way. And for those of you with kids, when they start learning about scientific ideas in school, like about evolution or about the origin of the universe, and if doubts come up for them when they don't see how this all fits with their faith, what would you say to them? How would you talk to them about it? Well, I'm hoping what I share today can help start to equip you in how to engage with our more science-minded brothers and sisters and kids. And speaking of kids with doubts about faith, this is me when I was in 8th grade. At that time, I had just been learning about the scientific discoveries around the origins of the universe, and I found the topic totally awe-inspiring. So when we had our annual science fair, the topic I chose was the Big Bang and the expansion of the universe. I was really excited to talk about it with the rest of my classmates because, actually, I just wanted to blow their minds and amaze them. And after I did my presentation, there was a classmate I didn't know very well. He pulled me aside and he said he wanted to talk to me more about what I had shared. And I was thinking, yeah, I actually got through to somebody. Somebody else is actually interested in this stuff. This is great. But as it turned out, my talk had kind of offended him. He went on to tell me that everything I shared with the class was false, that God made the universe and the earth 6,000 years ago, and there was definitely no such thing as the Big Bang. So I didn't see this coming at all. I didn't grow up with any religious upbringing, and back then I considered myself an atheist. I didn't have any friends who were religious or who expressed any belief in God, so I had no idea how to even engage in this conversation. So I don't really remember saying much in response. I do remember him saying that at his church, there were people who used to study science, but then later they discovered God. And once they discovered God, they never went back. And he went on to say that he prayed I would come to see the truth. So I didn't feel offended in the conversation. I actually could tell he was coming from a good place, and it took courage for him to have this very awkward confrontation with me. But honestly, I came away feeling kind of sad for him. The religion he was ascribing just seemed so small, and frankly, it seemed like these were people just afraid to face reality. And all this just reinforced this view I already had that science and faith weren't compatible, that believing in God meant shutting the door on the mystery and the wonder of the universe that was being uncovered through the scientific process. In my mid-20s, I became a Christian, and that is a whole other story that I could unpack in an entire other message. So I won't get into it all now, but I will say that it was around then that I began to understand that science, how learning about the physical, natural world and how it works, isn't at odds with faith, but actually can bring a whole new depth and understanding to our faith. And it's possible to actually fully embrace both. And I found for me, science opens up the scriptures in new ways. Science draws us into experiencing the awe and the wonder of God. And God has left so many wonders and so many mysteries for us to explore and to contemplate. This image is just one example of that. The image on the screen here is one of the many incredible pictures taken last year by the James Webb Space Telescope. And this is a picture of a massive cloud of gas and dust called the Pillars of Creation, which is thousands of light years away from us. And this measures over 4 light years across, which is just incredibly huge. I mean, to give some sense of scale, if we scaled everything down so the Earth was just 1 inch long, the Pillars of Creation would be about 50 miles across. This massive cloud in space actually turns out to be a nursery where new stars and new planetary systems are being formed. It's totally incredible and something that we had no idea was even there until just a few decades ago. Over the last century, scientists have been peeling back the layers of our understanding of the universe and have been uncovering a cosmos that's more immense and beautiful and awe-inspiring than what we could have ever imagined. Dr. Keltner is a psychology professor who runs UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center and collaborated with Pixar on the science behind the movie Inside Out. And he recently published a book called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. And in the opening, he writes, "How can we live the good life? 20 years into teaching happiness, I have an answer. Find awe." Keltner defines awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. Keltner writes this from a very secular point of view, and I find it amusing that he treats this like this brand new discovery and insight. But the reality is that this isn't exactly new. The wisdom of being in touch with that feeling of awe is everywhere in Scripture. Throughout the Bible, there's a call for us to fear God that is mentioned over 140 times. Now, the Hebrew word used in the Scriptures for fear is the word yirah, which doesn't exactly have the same meaning in English as the word for fear. The Hebrew word yirah might be more accurately translated as awe or trembling reverence, that feeling we might have in our inner being when we're in the presence of something incredibly beautiful or majestic or more powerful than us. So when the Bible is calling us to fear God, actually the Bible's calling us to find awe and wonder. Here's one of those many references to fearing God in Proverbs. Proverbs is the book of wisdom in the Bible, which covers nearly every aspect of life. And I find it really interesting that Proverbs opens with these lines as basically an introduction or a preamble. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. By substituting the word awe or trembling reverence for the word fear in this passage, the meaning of the verse comes into sharper focus. The awe and trembling reverence of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. When we tap into that sense of awe, we realize that we're not at the center of the universe. We are not in control, and we do not have all the answers. And I think this helps us take on an attitude where we can be curious, where we can have a learning mindset. We can be open to changing our minds. And it's this mindset that's the beginning of knowledge and wisdom. And if we don't come at life with that attitude of humility, it doesn't matter how much we read or study or how smart we are destined to be fools and we won't find wisdom. Many of the Psalms are intended to try and capture and evoke that feeling of being in awe of God. Here's just one example from Psalm 8, where David says, "Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. Through the praise of children and infants, you have established a stronghold against your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them." I think it's really interesting that David finds value in taking time to consider the heavens, the moon, and the stars, and that contemplating the natural world has been a practice that people have been doing for thousands of years. And in this psalm, the contemplation ultimately leads David to a place of wonder and of gratitude, to realize that despite our relative insignificance compared with the scale of creation and the power of God, that God would still care for us and dwell with us. Now, back in the time when David wrote this psalm, they only knew about the stars that were visible in the night sky. which is about 5,000 stars. That's a big number. But now we know that in the observable universe, there are more than 200 billion trillion stars. That's far more stars than all the grains of sand on all the beaches and all the deserts on Earth. And we know that nearly every one of these stars likely have planets orbiting around them. So as awe-inspiring as the heavens were to people who lived in David's time, how much more awe-inspiring are they now? How much more do the heavens evoke trembling reverence? And yet, despite the incredible vastness of the heavens, which certainly makes me feel small, increasingly it looks like our planet is quite special and unique. The more we study other star systems, we're finding that planets like Earth seem to be incredibly rare. And the events that led to there being life on Earth seem to be so improbable that many scientists are starting to think that maybe those events have only happened once. That maybe Earth is home to the only conscious beings in the entire cosmos. The jury is still out on this. There's lots of interesting debate on the topic. But regardless of all that, the lack of obvious signs of life that we see in the rest of the universe shows just how precious our world is and how precious each human life is. What is mankind that you are mindful of us? Human beings that you care for us. Many of us may assume that the church and science have been fundamentally at odds from the beginning of the scientific revolution. That's what I used to think. But it turns out that many of those stories of conflict were actually invented or exaggerated over time. Modern historians now pretty much universally reject the idea that religion and science have been in conflict throughout history. Medieval Catholic mathematicians and philosophers are widely considered to be the founders of modern science. Believing in God and a creator provided the initial motivation for people to study nature systematically, because there was an underlying belief or assumption that nature and mathematics were the products of a mind and governed by laws. So there was a belief that nature could fundamentally be knowable. Almost all of the early giants of science, like Isaac Newton, described their study of science as a way of learning the mind of God. But what about more modern scientists? I mean, aren't they all atheists? Well, not really. In the 20th century, 65% of Nobel Prize winners in scientific fields were self-identifying Christians, with another 21% being of the Jewish faith, and only 11% identified themselves as atheists or agnostics. This chart shows the percent of Nobel Prizes won by self-identified Christians, and I find it really interesting that the percentage is lowest in literature and is actually higher for scientists who focus on the natural sciences like physics and chemistry. Werner Heisenberg, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics and a lifelong Christian, once said, "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you." I've realized that my older son is wired very similarly to how I am. So last year, I started putting together a running list of awe-inspiring scientific discoveries for my kids. So when they get older, they'll have kind of like a science devotional. And these are things I've learned along the way that have evoked a sense of wonder and awe in God's creation, and just really indicates how there really does seem to be a sense of design and beauty and purpose in creation. I was thinking of sharing a handful of these with you all because there's so many great examples of this, but I decided to just focus on one today. So even all these years later, I still think the scientific discoveries around the origin of the universe are totally mind-blowing. So I wanted to talk about this because, like my classmate in middle school, I've run across a number of Christians who see this as a very uncomfortable topic, maybe a threatening one, worried that this is somehow threatening to their faith. But to the contrary, I think what science has uncovered about the origins of the universe is really encouraging for people of faith. Jana Harmon, who wrote a book compiling stories of atheists converting to Christianity, said that while there were many reasons the people she interviewed that inspired them to transition from atheism to Christianity, the number one reason cited was learning about the scientific discovery of the origin of the universe. So why is that the case? Well, to actually tell the story, I need to zoom out and give the context. For thousands of years, there have been two competing worldviews, pantheism and theism. And those worldviews are very much alive and at odds today. Pantheism basically says that the universe and nature is itself God, or contains God or the gods. Atheists can be included in this category as well because they think the universe is all that is. And for atheists, the universe is kind of like a mindless God governed by the laws of nature. Central to this pantheism belief is that the universe isn't something that has been created. There's no external creator. In this worldview, the universe is timeless and has no beginning. And the worldview of pantheism has been widespread for thousands of years, and in many cultures is the dominant worldview. Many of the world religions outside of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are based on pantheism. The famous Greek philosophers like Plato were pantheists. And honestly, many people these days in Silicon Valley and in academia have a pantheist worldview. People who might describe themselves as spiritual but not religious or New Age oftentimes have a pantheist worldview. On the other side of the coin, theism has also been around for thousands of years, and theism is the view that God is separate from the universe and nature. Over 3,000 years ago, the Jewish people were theists surrounded by pantheist cultures and traditions. And the Jews held the countercultural view that the universe itself is not God, and the universe doesn't contain God or the gods. Instead, the universe and nature points to an external creator. And that means that the universe isn't timeless, but instead had a definitive beginning. That there was a moment in history when God caused time, space, and even the laws of nature to actually come into being. And what I find really compelling and fascinating about this debate is that these views are mutually exclusive. There's not a middle ground here. Either the universe had a beginning or it didn't. So either the pantheists are right or the theists are right, but they both can't be right. The pantheist view of the universe being eternal and unchanging was held by many scientists and academics in the early and mid-1900s. Theism was seen as, superstitious and outdated. And this pantheist worldview was kind of the default worldview highly educated people held at the time. It was a lens people looked at the world, influenced by the culture around them. But in 1929, an astronomer named Edwin Hubble discovered something very strange when he started studying and classifying galaxies. He noticed that all the galaxies he was looking at were actually speeding away from Earth. And the further away the galaxies were, the faster the galaxies were racing away from us. And this meant something totally unexpected. It meant the universe, it wasn't static and it wasn't unchanging. Actually, it meant that the fabric of space itself was expanding like a balloon. And an expanding universe, if you stop to think about it, has these wild implications, because if the universe is expanding, it means if you wind back the clock, in the past, the universe would have been smaller and all of those galaxies and stars would have been packed closer to each other. And if you wind back the clock far enough, by about 13.8 billion years, the universe would be shrunk down to a point of infinite density and zero size, to an actual moment of creation, a time in history before which time has no meaning, an actual beginning. Now, there were many in the broader scientific community who couldn't believe the implications that the universe could have had a literal time and point of origin, and this shook many people to their core. One example was Robert Jastrow. And Jastrow was a brilliant scientist and a founding director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, and he was a lifelong agnostic. But with the increasing evidence of there being an actual moment of creation, he began to hold a belief that if there was a beginning to the universe, there must also be a creator. I love how Jastrow describes this feeling of bewilderment he experienced as this dawned on him. He wrote that the discovery of a cosmic beginning is an exceedingly strange development, unexpected by all but the theologians. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Well, since Hubble's discovery, more and more supporting evidence has come out that there actually was a time and place of origin of the universe. One of the most significant pieces of corroborating evidence that pretty much won over even the toughest skeptics was discovered totally by accident by a young scientist named Arno Penzias in 1964. And he was at Bell Labs, and he was testing this super sensitive antenna, basically to detect faint radio waves. And to his surprise, he found this low, mysterious noise that seemed to be coming from all directions. So after tuning and retuning the equipment, he discovered that the source of the waves wasn't coming from Earth, wasn't coming from the sun, or another planet, or even from our galaxy, but the signal was coming from everywhere. And you couldn't believe that was possible. So apparently he found some pigeons nesting in the equipment. He got rid of those, cleaned out everything, but the mysterious noise was still there. And he eventually realized that this background radio wave noise exactly fit what was predicted by a team of physicists at Princeton, who calculated what the after effects would be of an explosion that created the universe. They predicted this low hum, kind of like a background noise that's echoing across the universe, a background radiation at exactly the same frequency that Penzias heard on his radio wave antenna. Penzias eventually won the Nobel Prize in Physics for this discovery. And more recently, in 2012, NASA was able to produce a much more updated picture, a more detailed map of what this cosmic background radiation looks like when more sophisticated instruments were sent to measure the slight variations in the signal across the sky. And this map is often referred to as the fingerprint of God and represents a snapshot of the earliest possible observable stage of the universe. One thing that can be seen in this picture of the fingerprint of God is that there was design and form in the universe from the very beginning. We now know that there was this very particular distribution of matter that turned out to be balanced at this incredible level of precision and tuning that was just right for galaxies and stars to form. And what I think is so mind-blowing is that this background radiation echoes everywhere across the universe, visible at all locations as long as we know how to look for it, as proof of the moment of creation. Arno Penzias spent his last years living in San Francisco, and I found out he actually passed away just a few weeks ago at the age of 90. He was Jewish and maintained a strong belief in God throughout his life. He once said about his discovery, "If I had no other data than the early chapters of Genesis, some of the Psalms, and other passages of Scripture, I would have arrived at essentially the same picture of the origin of the universe, as is indicated by the scientific data." In Psalm 19, David writes, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world." I love how David evokes a sense of awe in looking at the stars and the heavens, but he really couldn't have known just how prophetic and amazing these words are in light of what science has revealed about the universe. Because it turns out that the heavens literally do pour forth speech day after day in the form of this mysterious background radiation that we've only just learned to be able to hear and to interpret. And this speech with no words has been passing through our bodies and is buzzing in the air all around us every second of every day, echoing and testifying to the moment of creation. Well, this talk only really just scratches the surface. I've put on the screen here a couple of good resources if you want to dive deeper into this topic. And for those of you who are wired like me, I hope you're encouraged that it is possible to integrate both the science-minded part of ourselves and the faith side. and that science is a tool that helps us to understand the universe. And the universe fills us with wonder and awe and points us towards God. And if it's not your natural inclination to be interested in this kind of stuff, first of all, thank you for listening, for giving me the chance to share about a topic that I think is so fascinating and so meaningful. And I hope you can take something out of today's message that helps you share the awe, the wonder, and love of God for those of us who may be struggling to reconcile a scientific view of the world with a Christian worldview. And I hope everyone here can take some time this week to go outside at night, look at the stars and consider the heavens, and take some time to experience the awe and the wonder of God's creation.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. No point of reference, you spoke to the dark, fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were meant to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. God of your promise, don't speak in vain, but syllable empty or void. Once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you say. If it all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. The stars were meant to worship, so will I. The mountains bow in reverence, so will I. The oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. The wind goes where you send it, so will I. cry out in silence, so will I. If the sun of all our praises still falls shy, then we'll sing again 100 million times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart with everything you've done. Every part designed in the work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see your heart in a billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I. Every good, perfect gift comes from you. Every good and perfect gift comes from you. Every good and perfect gift comes from you. Father of light, Father of lights, you never change. You have no tuning. Father of lights, you never change. have no turning. And every curve